My name is Edgar Mannheimer, and this is Kalam, a podcast about the Middle East.
So this is where the explosion happened at about 6:30 last night here in Majdal Shams. You can see the crater where the rocket landed. It blew this fence right out, and you can see children's bicycles and scooters all among the wreckage here. And also, if you look at the fence, you can see shrapnel holes. And over in the corner, there are little pools of blood that they've tried to clear up, and there's blood also spattered on the walls. There is a bomb shelter right here next to the football pitch, and we're told that there was a siren moments before the explosion, but that no one had enough time to react.
What you just heard was a BBC journalist describing the aftermath of the massacre at Majdal Shams, where a rocket exploded on a football pitch, killing 12 children and injuring dozens. In the background, you can hear the chanting of Druze elders as they lead the funeral procession for the dead children. In a tiny community of just over 10,000 people, the death of 12 children affects everyone. The loss is yet another example of the human toll of the seemingly never-ending crisis in the Middle East. I will never forget seeing pictures of slabs of human flesh caught in the metal fence surrounding the football pitch. There are no words to properly express what kind of loss this is for all humanity. It's unclear where the rocket came from, if it was a misfired rocket from Hezbollah or a defect in Israel's Iron Dome system. What is clear is that the blame lies with us all. In the aftermath of the massacre at Majdal Shams, many people wondered who these people were and whether or not they had Israeli citizenship. Majdal Shams is one of 5 remaining Arab villages in the occupied Golan Heights in northern Israel. Before the 1967 war, these villages were a part of Syria. Majdal Shams is predominantly Druze, a religious offshoot of Shia Islam. That's the short version. For the long version, I was lucky enough to be able to speak with an artist and activist born and raised in Majdal Shams, Wael Tarabieh. We'll be getting back to Wael and the community of Majdal Shams in just a minute. But first, a reminder. Kalam Podcast is made possible through listeners like you. If you enjoy listening to Kalam Podcast, please subscribe to the show in whatever podcast application you're listening to right now, and please give us a rating. This helps other people find out about us. And if you'd like to support the show with a small donation, consider signing up to Kalam Podcast on Patreon for just $3 a month. In addition to supporting the show, you'll gain access to lots of great bonus content. Go to patreon.com and search for Kalam Podcast, or go straight to patreon.com/Kalam Podcast. That's patreon.com/Kalam Podcast. Now, without further ado, here's Wael Tarabieh. Wael Tarabieh is an artist and activist and the manager of the Program of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, Al Marsad, the Arab Human Rights Center in Golan. Wael, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today on Kalam Podcast.
Thank you for having me in this topic.
So, first of all, I'd just like to direct my condolences for the massacre that occurred at the football field in Majdal Shams a couple of weeks ago, where 12 children and young people were killed in a rocket attack. Could you describe what happened that day and where you were and sort of how you found out that this had happened?
Yes. That day I was exactly in this place where I'm sitting right now. And from this place, which is about less than 200 meters from the place, I heard the bombing and I saw the fire there. So I was one of those who reached the place in the first 5 minutes of the explosion. Actually, it's really a big massacre, and it's very painful even to recall it and to describe what happened. Actually, children were pieces of their bodies all around the place. People needed a lot of time to understand what's going on, even to believe what their eyes were seeing, because we never had such a massacre in the closed story of the Golan Heights. It was very tough, very painful, and maybe the most painful aspect beside the kids, the victims themselves, were the mothers and the fathers who came to look for their kids and to open, the faces and the bodies, the remains of the bodies, to know if this is their girl or boy who we're looking for. And up till now, people, living in this sadness, and black flags all over the village, everywhere. Actually, it was very, very, very painful incident for all the people, and it was not exclusively for the families, because here in the Golan, we are connected very closely to each other. So every kid had not only his small family, he has the brother family and the friends, and we are a very small community. After that, in the media, there were many talks about what happened in Majdal Shams. About the tragic side, this is what we are living with and will continue to live with for a long time. But if we will talk about the meanings of what happened and how the media, approached what happened, this is another talk. Actually, the media and the Israeli media, the Israeli government, first of all, they decided to use this bloody incident in their agenda, and in a very cynical way and in a very inhuman way, when they said from the first minutes, we want to bomb Beirut and Dahia as a revenge for the boys and the girls of Majdal Shams. And this has shocked us, all of us. Even the families themselves, the fathers and the brothers and sisters and mothers, when they hear the statement, they could not stay calm, and they declared directly and very strongly, we are not demanding revenge. We do not agree to use our tragedy in the Israeli wars. So the kids in Beirut and everywhere in the world, we feel as ours. And I think in this case, some few people who had, talked with anger about a kind maybe of revenge, they withdraw from these statements within a few hours. And the majority, the whole community of the occupied Syrian Golan Heights declared in a statement which was published that we do not agree to use us and our catastrophe in the Israeli wars. Actually, Israel do not need, reasons for its war. They are doing it all the time. But this cynical use of us, it was very, very, very painful for us. And as you know, many political leaders and religious leaders all over the region also said that this is unacceptable to use the victims in this way. So this is one side of the story. And I think the statements that came from the ordinary people in the Golan Heights made this Israeli campaign relatively fail. They could not, take a word from the victims themselves that, yes, we want you to revenge for us. And what is in the middle of the tragedy, there is sarcastic points. This is also very, very important. When the occupying power, Israel, of the Arab Syrian lands, wants to revenge these occupied people by killing other kids and innocent people in other Arab states, in Lebanon. So, this is really one of the things that we have to stop and to think of.
Yeah.
And these lies, I think, is part of the whole narrative that Israel is circulating everywhere.
Mm.
Actually, when they did their attack on Lebanon, on Beirut, 2 kids were killed.
Yeah.
A boy and a girl. And for the tragedy to be complete, both of these kids, they love football like ours.
Yeah.
So some of the people here said, we have to raise not only 12 photos of the victims, we have another 2. We have 14 photos of our kids. We have to raise them in the village everywhere. So this is, I think this is the humanistic side of the tragedy, and the bad use, the cynical use of the people's tragedy in what's going on in the region.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw where this was shared widely of, I believe it was during maybe a funeral procession for one of the kids. And I think it was an Israeli minister of trade or something like that came there. And one of the victims' family members, a young man, went up to him and started shouting in Hebrew, I think, calling him a hypocrite and using these kids' blood for their own interest. How was the scene in Majdal Shams?
Yeah, they came. Actually, one of the famous ministers of the Israeli government, Smotrich, came to Majdal Shams.
It was Smotrich, yeah, okay, yeah.
So everybody knows who is Smotrich and how he's torturing Palestinian people.
Yeah.
So Smotrich became very, very soft human being, very, very humanistic, and came to Majdal Shams. But actually, young people started to chant against him, and finally he was fired from the place. So he was told that you are not acceptable here, we do not want to see you, and you are dancing on the blood of our kids. Not only Smotrich, Bibi Netanyahu himself came to Majdal Shams, also for the same, just to, to say the short phrase they want to say, that this incident will be punished. And they decided to make this, statement from the place of the crime itself. So they came here. This was the purpose. From Majdal Shams, we are telling the Lebanese people, so we will revenge. Yeah. And also people gathered and in a demonstration and shouted that Netanyahu is a war criminal, and we do not wish to see you in our village in this time. So actually, people didn't succeed to fire him, but hundreds of people gathered around the place where he was, and some of them raised statement that the Golan is Arab and Syrian place. This statement that the Israel tried to sweep from everywhere. You are not allowed in these days to remind anybody that this is an occupied Arab-Syrian territory.
Yeah. This is what we're going to get into, I think, shortly. I just want to, before we leave the specific incident, the tragic massacre that happened, I just wanted to ask you, because you did mention that Majdal Shams is a small community. So I wanted to ask you if you were personally affected, if there was someone from your family that was killed or something like that.
Not from my small family, but from relatives, yes. And injured, we have 39 injured people who are still in hospitals. And maybe here it's worth to mention one aspect, that during all this mad war against the Palestinian people, the people of the occupied Golan, they felt safe in conscience all the time, because we are not side of this war. We are located on the south of Syria, and the Lebanese borders is very close to us. Shib'a is very close to us. We are talking about a few kilometers. So we are hearing the shelling every day. Every day we are hearing, and we witnessed also the missiles in the sky on us. And it happened that some missiles fell very close to the villages. our engagement in the war was all the time that we are feeling solidarity with the victims. So we thought that we are safe. We are away from to be injured or to be targeted. But this was one of the things that shocked the people here. Regarding the numbers, yes, you are right. Actually, in the Golan right now, we have 5 Arab villages. Altogether are 28,000 people. That's it. The 5 villages together. But also we have 34 illegal Jewish settlements in the Golan, who are counting now about 29, 30,000. Almost. They are a little bit more than us.
Okay.
But to imagine the situation, we have to remind that there were in the Golan, on the eve of the war of 1967, 340 villages and farms and 2 cities with a population of about 157,000 Syrians. All those people, and precisely 95% of the population of the Golan were forcibly displaced from the Golan to Syria.
In 1967?
67. And those who remained here, the 5 villages, at that time there were about 6,000 people in 67.
Okay.
So the Golan is empty now, and those people who were uprooted, unfortunately, no one is calling them refugees. No one is talking about the right of return for those Syrians who now are counting. Some people say around 1 million. But let's say it's about middle numbers, about 700, 800,000 people in the diaspora, not only in Syria, all over the world. So this is one of our story, which is unknown story and untold story. And that's why we are calling our situation, our Golan, the forgotten occupation. This is one book that we have in Al-Marsad website. If somebody is interested, can see it. And it's called the Forgotten Occupation, that talks about all the aspects of our life under the Israeli occupation.
Yeah, we'll be sure to put a link for that book in the show notes of this episode, because I know that a lot of people that listen to Kalam podcast and just people that I know personally have been so looking forward to hearing from someone from Majdal Shams to talk about the specific community. So let's get into it. I mean, historically, I don't know how far back we want to go, but when did the community of Majdal Shams and the surrounding villages and cities of the Arab Golan, when did they become, like, sort of take shape in sort of, I heard that there was a Druze leader, Fakhreddin II, who established Majdal Shams in the 1500s. Would you say that's around the time when it became a sort of the political or ethnic entity that it is today?
Actually, you got very, very far back in history.
Yeah.
But actually, I'm not an expert in these details. But Fakhreddin al-Ma'mi Emirati, it's known that he was connected with Europe, and he was in Italy, and he made an emirate from Lebanon, from Syria to South Palestine. At that time, I think what I know about this episode in history, that being a Druze, it was not the main thing in this political entity at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But more, the main thing, I think, is his attempt to bring modernism to the place and the way he ruled this emirate. And actually, I cannot tell much about history from that time, because I focus on the close history, which is much important for me. I can say that Majdal Shams was one of the main points during the 1925 revolt in Syria against the French mandate.
The Great Syrian Revolt was an uprising against French occupation that lasted from 1925 to 1927. It came as the dream of an independent democratic Syria was literally shot down as the French destroyed the newly formed Syrian army through airstrikes. The European colonial powers, who had used the Arabs of Greater Syria to crush the Ottomans during the First World War, had betrayed the Arabs and occupied their lands. So, naturally, the Great Syrian Revolt broke out, and it was spearheaded by the Druze leader Sultan al-Atrash, who in fact came from Majdal Shams.
And one of the leaders of the revolution was from the son of Majdal Shams. If you visit Majdal Shams now, you will find a statue of him on his horse. And this is one of the elements of our local history, which is connected to the bigger history of Syria.
Yeah.
Another thing I would like to focus on is some kinds of what I call them illusions or inaccurate, stereotypes circulating all over the media. For example, connecting the Golan with the Druze. Okay? So, all over the history, the Druze villages in Golan were these 5 villages, and they were always the minority. The vast majority of the Syrian Golani people who lived here, they were Muslims, Christians, Armenians, Cherkesses. All the ethnic fabrics that we know in Syria was represented in this small area. So
I see.
The Golan is, 1% of the Syrian state territory. And you can see that the Golan is a small Syria. And this part is totally, dismissed from all the talks about Golan. Connecting the Golan only to the Druze is an Israeli political agenda, and we can talk about it. When we talk now, people from Golan, I hope, are hearing us all over the world. So those people are forgotten. And the 3rd and 4th generation of them who are living in Europe and everywhere in the world, they are dreaming even to come to visit to see the remains of their villages. So this is one point I think it is important. The second one is the ethnic cleansing of the Syrian people from Golan was so big that nothing remained. I mean, the settlers who came in the first days after the occupation started to build their settlements from the stones of the Arab villages, which they have destroyed. And within a few weeks, many people who were forcibly displaced and who went away from the battles tried to come back to the Golan. The Israeli army arrested them in camps and forced them to sign on paper that they will not come back to the Golan, to release them to Syria. So within a few weeks, a few months, the Golan was empty of its citizens. From the other side, the Syrian government at that time decided that a man who moves from one place in the country to other place cannot be called refugee. So they created a new name for them. It means I don't know exactly, Nazihun in English, as displaced people, but as if by their own wish, they fled from one place to other place in Syria. So the Syrian government never talked about refugees in Syria and never used the right of return for its citizens. And that's why it was forgotten from 1967 until the Second War in 1973, when Syria regained 50 kilometers from the occupied Golan. And precisely it was Quneitra city, destroyed totally. They regained it. And at that time, Hafez Assad, the president of Syria, came and he lifted the Syrian flag and he declared that we liberated our occupied lands. And that's
Okay.
we were forgotten
Okay.
from that point on.
That's, I think, very useful information to people, because I don't think that I personally did not know that, especially about Golan, the Golan Heights, Hadbat Golan in Arabic, being like kind of a mini cosmos of greater Syria and its religious and ethnic diversity. But if we start a little bit from the beginning, for a lot of people, I think actually don't really know who the Druze are. I mean, I think people maybe have an idea that Druze are an ethnic group or a religious group or something in between, or something of both of them. So could you give us kind of a background of who the Druze are and what they are?
Well, actually, this is also merged in politics. So actually, the Druze is part of Islam. Very simple. And, we have tens of these varieties in Islam.
Yeah, of course.
It's called the 72nd part, one of the last parts of Islam. The Druze are very close to the Shia and very close to the Ismailiyah.
Yeah.
Very close. So, and I think there is nothing special from historical point of view in Druze. But, all this, it's intriguing, to talk about this secret minority, which is good for Hollywood films, about them. And, everywhere there is manipulation of these minorities. So, Druze all the time, they were part of the Islam, but they have their own differences. If you listen to for example, for the religious head in Lebanon, how he defines the Druze, he says, we are al-Muslimun, al-Muwahhidun, al-Muslimun. This is, al-Muslimun is the basics from which the Druze made a little bit differences from other parts of Islam.
The Druze faith is often said to be shrouded in mystery, and the fact is that many of its religious practices are unknown to outsiders. But essentially, it's an offshoot of Shia Islam, developed by preachers who arrived to the Fatimid Caliphate in medieval Egypt. The name Druze is derived from one of its central preachers named Ad-Darazi. The history of Ad-Darazi and the Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim is fascinating and legendary and mythical. I would encourage listeners to look into it, especially those who plan to visit Cairo.
But in our context, it was manipulated and used in different ways. And what is the stereotypes that the Israelis basically tried to create? That was even before the 67 war. It was before the establishment of the Israeli state. For example, I'll give you one example from the history.
Uh-huh.
In 1939, the Jewish agency at that time thought that in the Galilean we have small minorities, so we can get rid of them, and this will make settling the Galilee easier when we get rid of them. At that time, there were only 14,000 Druze in Galilee. Only. So there was an attempt to buy lands in Jabal al-Arab in Syria, close to Suweda. And at that time, there was the leader was Sultan al-Atrash, the leader of the Syrian revolt against French mandate. And
in the 1920s.
Yes. So they tried, why don't we move them all and get rid of them? And we can find this information in the Israeli archives, in the Jewish agency reports from that time. And all this information were published in a very important book of Professor Qais Ferro, recently, a few years ago, who tells the story of these minorities, and especially the Druze, how it was manipulated by the Zionist movement at that time, by the Jewish agency. And now many of these Druze, Israeli Druze who are still living there, the new generation do not know that there was such an attempt to get rid of them. So this is the importance of history, to go back to history. And I think our story is related to those years, because if we get back, for example, to the documents of the Zionist movement, we will find that our territory, the Golan and Hawran, from the 19th century, were from those places which the Zionists thought it must be within the future Jewish state, because first of all, of water, the state needs water, and this is where water starts from Jabal al-Sheikh, from Hawran, from Golan. So
and these are like mountain ranges in the area of the Golan Heights.
Yes, because for example, 30% of the water in Israel is from the north, from Golan. So I mean that in the imaginary of the Zionists, they needed all these resources to establish the state, the Jewish state. That's why we can find, for example, that I remember there is a book of Gottlieb Schumacher, a German man who came to Palestine in 1888. So he had a book about the Jordan Valley, and he had another book which is called Golan, not Golan. He took this Golan, where he is documenting everything in Golan. He documenting all the people living, how they are living. He documenting the nature and the geography and the natural resources, and even how many qaba'il, asha'ir, in Golan.
Tribes and clans.
Tribes. And even he counts how many tents and how many people living there. Actually, this material, this data, was very important for the Zionists to study, Palestine and the Golan as part of the whole project. So when we talk about the Druze, I think we have to put them in this context. Not as, something interesting to know about, those people who came from...
worshipping al-Hakim and stuff like that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I think it's interesting as well to know, because the Druze of Majdal Shams do not have Israeli citizenship. What are the civic rights and limitations of the people of Majdal Shams?
What happened that when Israel occupied the Syrian Golan in 1967, they ruled the Golan under military rule for 14 years. In 1981, the Israeli government decided to annex the Golan to Israel and to stop the military rule and to have the civil rules, as to consider the Golan as part of Israel. So the military rule was finished in 1981-82. At that time, when the Israelis declared the annexation of Golan Heights, our small people here, about 16,000 people they counted at that time, they refused this decision. And at that time, we declared a strike. I remember I was in the 8th grade at that time. This small community said, we will not give up our identity. We are Arab Syrians and the Druze, but we are not only Druze. So our connection, our belonging, our history, our fathers and grandfathers who fight for the independence of Syria will not agree to become Israelis by the Israeli Knesset, decision. So at that time, the schools were turned into prisons, and Israel made a siege of all the villages. They cut our connection with each other. They brought to Golan about 16,000 soldiers, the same number of the population itself.
Wow.
They knocked every door. People were in their houses, and they came to every house with a soldier who is talking Arabic, and they proposed the Israeli citizenship identity cards to the family. So those who refused, and the majority refused, were taken to the schools, and they were put there for a few days. After 3 weeks, they stopped the siege, and the people of all the villages gathered these blue identity, Israeli identity cards in the squares and burned them.
Wow.
This was a message to the Israeli government that we do not agree to change our identity and our roots.
Yeah.
But, we didn't succeed to stop the decision. Actually, Israel decided, and they started, the rules on the Golan as a part of Israel. But politically, we succeeded to say no to this Israeli decision. And actually, from that point, the forgotten occupation became a little bit known, because what happened in 81.
Sure. It sounds a little bit like the first Intifada.
Yes. Actually, some Palestinians say that they were inspired from the small community in Golan in the first Intifada for the resistance.
Sure.
And it was a peaceful resistance in the Golan.
Yeah.
At the same time, we had two major events in the war. First of all, there were in Hama, in Syria, a big massacre.
Yeah.
That a few people knew about it. At the same time,
Hafiz al-Assad at that time.
Yes. And a while after our strike that lasted for 6 months in the Golan, Israel invaded Lebanon. So these big, incidents made the story of Golan get down from the titles. It was
sure, yeah.
And so it was again, forgotten for 4 years.
Yeah. So the Druze community is spread out over many different countries, and many of these different countries have very different systems of governing, obviously, and many of these countries are enemies. So what is the relationship, if we first look at the Druze in Majdal Shams and the Druze who accepted Israeli citizenship, and many of them who serve in the Israeli army?
Okay, just first of all, we have not only Majdal Shams, we have Majdal Shams, Mas'ada, Buqa'atha, Ain Qimya, and Al-Ghajar. 4 of the 5 villages with a vast majority of Druze. We have some Christian families also, villages. And Al-Ghajar village is not a Druze. Al-Ghajar village is Alawi, Muslim Alawi.
Ah, okay. And these are the 5 villages in Golan that are Arab.
Yeah, remain in Golan. This is the first point. Secondly, regarding the Druze, actually, we are in the Golan right now. About 75% of us are permanent residents in Israel and not citizens.
Yeah.
We have the same legal situation as East Jerusalem.
Okay, yeah.
So we have laissez-passer. They don't have passports, Israeli passport. Also, we have laissez-passer travel document. We are permanent residents and not citizens. Those who accepted the Israeli citizenship are considered Israeli citizens, but the majority are still not citizens in Israel.
Yeah.
To distinguish between the Druze in Golan and Galilee, because many people think it's the same. In Galilee, they have an obligatory to serve in army. They cannot refuse to serve in army in Galilee. I mean the Druze. They have to go to army, and those who refuse to go to army, they will go to prison.
Yeah, like any Israeli citizen.
Yes, but not in Golan. In Golan, no one is obliged to go to Israeli army.
And so Golan and Galilee are neighboring communities. They're sort of next to each other. So have the Druze, do they still have relationships with each other across these borders? Or was that relationship cut a bit when one side decided to go to take citizenship and the other side decided not to?
Actually the borders were disappeared after the occupation of Golan. So we could move to Galilee and other places in Palestine. And until recently, we were very determined to to make a political or to show the political differences between us. It's from the religious point of view, okay, all are Druze, but we are Arab Syrian Druze, and they are, we consider, Arab Palestinian Druze. Regardless of,
Okay.
Yeah. So this is political difference, and we kept it in all the political activity until recently, that we are different from this point of view. Actually, we have same families, we have relatives, we have marriages from each other. This is a very historical, tie, which is out of politics. But but the politics makes us all the time say that we are Syrians before to talk about our religious identity.
Sure. Yeah. So the Arab Syrian Druze and the Palestinian Arab Druze, these are two communities. I mean, would Palestinian Arab Druze consider themselves Palestinian Arab even if they serve in the Israeli military?
I can't talk in their name.
Sure.
I think some of them, yes, and some of them, no. Some of them consider them Israelis for everything. And some of them, I know, especially in the new generations, who have kind of conscious that they are returning back to their Palestinian roots.
Yeah.
And even after, the nationality, the new rules, the new apartheid rules in Israel, and how they consider that this is only a Jewish state, a national state.
Yeah.
This makes a kind of awareness among many of them who saw that they are serving in army, they are dying in the Israeli wars, but their lands are being confiscated more than the other Palestinians.
Yeah.
And they are suffering from that. So this is, I think, motivation for a new kind of awareness.
Yeah. So you're saying there's a new generation of Druze who have Israeli citizenship, who are maybe whose parents sort of bought into the idea that we are now Israeli and we should be happy with that. And then the new generation is realizing that Israel is becoming more and more of like a Jewish supremacy state, and that even if we wanted to, we could never be full citizens because it's apartheid. So how about the relationship between the Druze communities that are in Lebanon and Syria? Because in Lebanon, there's, obviously Walid Jumblat, which he's the leader of a political party with a specific ideology, but it also has like a Druze profile. So the communities of the Druze of Golan, what are the relationships between them and the communities in Syria and Lebanon?
Actually, all these relationships were normal until the occupation. I mean,
of course, yeah, I can imagine that. I mean, in the past there were no borders. It was. I mean, my question would be irrelevant if I asked it before 1967. Yes. Of course, I definitely realize that. But but I mean, I am asking because of these modern political borders that are so unnatural. But yeah.
Yes. For example, my grandmother is from Lebanon, from my mother's side, and my grandmother, from my father's side, is from Suega. So we are connected, as families and marriages with...
And Suega is in Syria.
Syria, yeah. South Syria. So, and many families here are connected to have relatives in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan also, a little bit, and in Palestine. So I think that being a minority, and especially this minority, the Druze minority in Lebanon had, and in Syria also, they played a political role, I think, bigger than their numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah.
What is being also talked about, Walid Jumblat, for example, in Lebanon, that he represents a small, portion of the Lebanese people, but his political weight is more than his people, the number.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And I think the same thing happened in 1925 when Sultan Atrash decided to start, the revolts against the French mandate.
And he was Druze.
He was Druze, yeah. But but his aim was, which is very famous, that religion is for God and the country is for all of us. It means that everyone has his own belief. But when we talk about Syria, Syria is for all the Syrians. We all must be equal in Syria. And I think it is very progressive, understanding of citizenship and being Syrian and etc. So if to talk about relationships, now we are cut, actually in Golan, we are cut from all around us. And this was recently, because if we take it in a historical, line, after the occupation of the Golan, we were cut from all the sides except to go to Palestine. This is the first step.
Yeah.
In 1977, for the first time, Israel allowed 12 people from Golan, young people, to attend Damascus University. From that time, we had young people who studied in Damascus. They were crossing the border in Quneitra, where is the UN forces there, to the Syrian side, and go to Damascus. But to know that Damascus is from my place here is only 60 kilometers.
Yeah. I mean, sure. The distances are so short. I mean, people don't realize. I mean, I'm sure as well from where you are to Beirut, it's also just like a few hours by car.
Yeah. So we had hundreds of young people who were graduated from Damascus University, and also this continues until the 2011. When the uprising started in Syria, this way was cut, and actually we had 3 ties with Syria along the past years. The first one was the students who studied in Damascus. The second one is the religious pilgrim, that the Israelis allowed religious people, only men, not women, to make a visit to holy places in Syria for 2 weeks every year.
Okay.
This is the second tie.
Okay.
And the third one is in 2009, the Israelis agreed to open the gates in Quneitra for us to market our apples in Damascus market.
Okay.
So the Golani apples is famous. That is, so these 3 ties we had with Syria. But after 2011, they all were cut.
Yeah,
no more students, no more visits, no more marketing fruits in Damascus. And now we are totally, and this was an Israeli decision. The Syrian side is ready to open again all these things and to accept people from the Golan. Actually, we have every family here is a separated family between Golan and Syria. So, but the Israelis decided that that's it. No more visits to Syria, no more students, no more ties with Syria, because they have their own project to take this small community to pressure them into being Israelis, and that's it. And they think that this way they can kill the case of the occupied Golan, because they are forgetting, and many people are forgetting, the hundreds of thousands of Golani Syrians who are still living in diaspora. So the fate of Golan will not be decided by these 5 small villages. Even if all of them decided to be Israelis, Golan will stay Arab and Syrian.
Because the majority of Golanis are not even there.
And the international law. That Golan is a occupied part from the Syrian state.
Wow, this has been really, really instructive, I think, to understand these dynamics. Can I just ask you, what do people in Majdal Shams today, if you would ask them, who do you think launched the rocket that killed the children a few weeks ago? Who do people blame?
Actually, people, First of all, we don't have evidence to make a very confident claim.
Yeah.
And we think where I work in the Human Rights Center at Marsad, we published a statement that we think that this question must be investigated. But people here, all the time, even before that, in the small talks here in the villages, people say if something happened or any kind of bombing happened here, it must be either a mistake from Lebanon or a failure from the Israeli missiles. So, because we are not targeted from any side.
Yeah, so either a mistake, either a misfire from Hezbollah or a defect in the Iron Dome system, basically.
Yes. And some people even think of the conspiracy theory that it's what aimed to kill some kids in Majdal Shams, and so we won't deal with this third one. But these two ideas are people, but they cannot decide anything. And I think we deserve to know the truth.
Yeah.
Transparent, investigation on this crime.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for speaking with Kalam podcast today. Before I know I've kept you for a long time, and I'm very grateful. But I just wanted to ask a little bit about yourself personally. Wael Tarabieh, you're an artist. Apart from the work that you do at the Human Rights Center, can you talk a little bit about how it's been to be an artist since the 7th of October, and then of course after the massacre in Majdal Shams? I've spoken to many artists over the past 11 months, and I asked everyone, like, how do you relate to your art, and how has it changed? So how has this latest tragic wars and genocides affected your art?
Actually, I'm not creating art so intensively in the last years. Actually, I work in a grassroots center. It's called Majdal Center for Arts and Culture. And for 25 years, I'm teaching art in Majdal Shams. Actually, I studied art in Haifa University and then in St. Petersburg Academy of Fine Arts. And when I came back in 1996, there were no artistic environments. So me and with my friends made our goal is to create this conditions for us to create as artists. And my main work and my main efforts all over these years is creating and developing this environment for artists. So those who were passing in my studio when they were kids, they went to Damascus and they finished the Faculty of Fine Arts and came back. Now we are, my colleagues, we are working together in the same center. And that's why in this specifically your question, my concern is about the kids who are in our courses, in our center that we are teaching them, sculpturing and painting and everything. And all the past days we were thinking how to use this medium that we have, our courses, how to deal with the trauma of many of these kids. During our sessions and our workshops that we are leading in our center. So me personally, I didn't express these things within my arts, but other artists did do. Many who did in poetry, in music, in painting. And we are thinking all the artists of monuments in the future for these kids to put it into place.
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate for sure. Wael Tarabieh, thank you so much for speaking with us today in Kalam podcast.
I thank you too, and hope to see you in Golan.
Inshallah. That was the artist and activist Wael Tarabieh and the 21st episode of Kalam Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. For continuous updates on the Middle East and on the podcast itself, please follow us on Instagram at Kalam Podcast. And as always, please like, subscribe, and rate. It helps other people find out about us. And if you'd like to make a small donation, you can do so by heading over to patreon.com/Kalam Podcast. For now, though, that's all from us. Peace.